Hello dear crypto friends, and welcome to this video in which we are going to analyze and compare this low in the crypto and Bitcoin market with the March 2020 low and try to figure out if this is similar, if this could repeat, what would need to happen for it to repeat, and maybe even attach a likelihood for this scenario that this was a huge drop now and that the market will recover, and that from here onwards we start rising and maybe even go directly into a rally as happened in March 2020. As we remember, Bitcoin recovered, the whole market recovered and went directly into a rally by late 2020. So what are the odds for that to happen? For that I have loaded a comparison chart. On the left you see the current low, and that is the situation in the 4-hour chart, and on the right you see the March 2020 low, and we want to compare these two now and try to understand what would need to happen for a repeat. Let us look at some Fibonacci levels, right? Let us look at some Fibonacci levels and try to compare the two moves, because here we saw that we went down in a steep manner, right? We have a similar situation actually. We have those two tops here, the fake pumps, right? It happened here like a fake pump and then it went lower. Here also fake pump and then it went lower. Then sideways, here also sideways, and then the massive pump began, and here also the massive pump began. So if we look at the fib levels, actually it is quite interesting to see that in March 2020 Bitcoin rebounded, right? It went pretty low here to 3,800 something. Then we rebounded massively. It went up in these two wick candles to 5,982, and then it went down again almost as low as the 0.236 Fibonacci support level. Look at this. This is crazy. I mean, this is like an insane rebound and then drop, and then it went up again, stabilized, went sideways and broke out of that range. So if that was to repeat, we would now actually, we went down, right, to 25,400. We rebounded to 31,300 something. And if this was to repeat, we would actually now go down as low as almost the 0.236 level to 26,881. However, I think that this did not happen and probably will not happen this time, because if we look at this comparison, it should have already happened, right? From a timing perspective, if we stretch this out, one candle is 4 hours, we see that this whole thing played out faster than it is playing out right now. So it should have already happened, right? It should have happened maybe here, and then we recover and start going upwards. So if we want to identify this, this might have actually been the scenario where it would have dropped to the 0.236, but obviously this didn't happen. And now we are ranging sideways on the 0.618 Fibonacci support level, and this also provided good support in this whole time span where it always retested the 0.618 Fibonacci level. So if this was to repeat, we spike now, and then we just continue our way upwards, and at some point we reach this level here, right? This level at about 40,000. This was also an area of resistance where it needed quite some time to stabilize back in 2020. It ranged for a long time on this area here until it broke out, back-tested, almost back-tested, and then off we went, right? So if this was to repeat, then I would say this area here, the 40,000 area, will be of significant importance. Then we would wobble around here in June, July, into August, breakout, backtest, right? The famous breakout backtest, which many assets always like to do. And then what would happen afterwards, after this backtest? Off we go into a new rally, which will be unexpected to many people. Now this is all fine and well, this is not bad, but what are the chances for that to happen, right? It's like there's no guarantee that just because this looks similar right now that Bitcoin will really do this. It could also happen that we go sideways now and go to a second even lower low. Now we do see that the RSI structure is similar, right? we went from peak here in the 60s down to about 11, right? Which is similar to what happened here, right? We went from an area of above 60 to around 11. And then this whole recovery looks also very, very familiar, as we can see. I mean, look at this, how familiar this looks, right? This whole range here looks very familiar to this one here. Even this stochastic RSI structure here, look at this here, this double peak structure looks quite similar to this we had in March 2020, and now it went lower and the 4-hour stochastic RSI went to oversold, and then we start going up again. So the structure in the RSI and stochastic RSI also look quite similar. Now, of course, this is still no proof that this will repeat exactly like it. Therefore, we have to go into the long-term chart and try to make some comparisons. Now, if we go into the long-term weekly chart and try to understand if there's a high likelihood that we are actually right now seeing some kind of March 2020 low, we have to look at the weekly RSI, and we do see that the weekly RSI is reaching values even below the March 2020 low, right? We are now sitting at, believe it or not, 33.19, which is lower than the 33.57 of the March 2020 low. So the weekly RSI is so oversold that only twice in Bitcoin's history has it been lower. December 2018 and in this 2014 bear market where it went as low as 28, okay? So the lowest it ever was just 5 points lower in the RSI. That was the historic low. So we are now at weekly RSI values that are really nearing historical low points. Now, of course, this means that we still could go lower because we are at 33 and the lowest was 28. So this means, of course, we still could go lower. And we said that the weekly moving average of 200 weeks normally provides some good support. As we know, it can wick lower. It can wick to the 290 week moving average. But if it goes lower, I think even if it wicks below, we should stabilize at the MA200 and then go higher again. But of course, since we are already so low, since the RSI is already so insanely oversold, I don't think there's too much potential anymore. I think the upside potential is higher than the potential to the downside. If we are sitting near historically low RSI values, what do you think is more likely, that we go even lower? It's like if you overstretch a spring and you overstretch it more and more and you reach a point where it's the most overstretched it ever was. So what is more likely, that Bitcoin breaks to the upside or to the downside? Like from a likelihood, I would say that we are now at least, if we have not hit the low, we are at least very near the low. And the RSI structure looks very similar to March 2020, and we are sitting near all-time historical lows, like all-time historical lows. That is crazy to think about it. Now the stochastic RSI, meanwhile, is also extremely oversold, and we see that even this structure here looks very similar to what happened in 2019. It's fascinating. So we had this peak here, right? Then it went low and high up again. And here also we have this double peak. It even had here some kind of double peak structure. It went low here, went low, then up again, low again, up again, low again, right? And if this was to still continue like it did back then, it would go up again and do this double peak structure here. So which we identified as going up, wobbling around, up, retest, and then go to new all-time highs. And this would of course correspond to our scenario, or let's say our theory, that this whole thing now is an expanded flat correction in a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 wave move. And this thing here was just a prolonged expanded flat correction in a wave 4, because wave 4s in Elliott wave theory are kind of stretched out, very long corrective structures, which sometimes are mistaken for bear markets. That is like Elliott wave theory. I'm not an expert on Elliott wave theory, friends, but that is basically what the theory says, that wave 4 corrective structures can be so prolonged and so bizarre that many people actually mistake them for bear markets. So if we are in such a structure, I think the probability is not so bad that this is actually the low. Now, of course, Bitcoin is fine and nice. Analyzing Bitcoin is fine and nice, but we must, of course, also analyze stocks, because we know that there's an insanely high correlation between the stock market and Bitcoin. And for that, it's always good to look to the Nasdaq. So what is the Nasdaq doing? Well, the Nasdaq, friends, is also seeing historically low values. So let us take a look at the RSI, right? If we look at the weekly RSI of the Nasdaq since the 80s, we see that it reaches now values that are the lowest in its recorded history, right? We are now sitting even below the March 2020 low. Just look at this here. We're sitting below the March 2020 low. In March 2020, the RSI was at 29.96. We are now sitting at 29.08, right? So there's only a few times in recorded Nasdaq history that we went lower. This was in 1987. This was in 1990. This was in this whole corrective structure of the dot-com bubble bear market. And there was also this instance in 2006. And another instance in 2008, of course, the financial crisis. So just think about this. Only a few times since the 80s has the Nasdaq weekly chart been lower than now. So with every passing week that we drop with the Nasdaq, with every passing week, the probability for an insane bounce is rising, because what happened every time when the weekly RSI went so low? Here, bounce. Here also, like even in the midst of this dot-com bear market, we at least had a quite insane bounce here. If I move in here, right, we had this bounce. Sure, it went lower and the RSI went again almost as low as it was here, but we see that even in this crazy bear market, the RSI didn't dip below 25. And it should also be noted that many people compare this to the dot-com bubble, right? Many people just go here, they take the bars here, they overlay it, they say, oh, look, this looks similar, so therefore we are probably in the same situation, and it will just drop down to 4,000. The Nasdaq will go down to 4,700 points, right? Or something like that, or 4,500. Now, I have to say to this, friends, the situation is vastly different from 2000. Just look at the RSI, for example. The RSI, when we started dropping, the RSI was actually at 57. So when we hit this bounce after the first, after the first bounce here, when we started going down in the dot-com bubble, the RSI was actually super high. It was at 58. At 58. Here, when we had this bounce, the RSI was already extremely low at 32, right? So this whole time, the RSI was a lot lower, and now we are already at 29. When was the RSI at 29 during the dot-com bubble? When was it at 29? We see that for the first time ever, it hit 29 when it was already somewhere here. So it was already halfway through its correction, right? It was already halfway through its correction, more than halfway through its correction when we hit 29. So it was already correcting massively. So from the highest point until the point when it hit 29, right? We want to see where it hit 29, around here. It already had corrected from 4,800 down to 1,800. So this was already a 62.5% correction, friends. A 62.5% correction. And now we are sitting at a similar value, and we are now having only a 29% correction, okay? This is not even half as much. This is not even half as much as in the dot-com bubble, and we already have an RSI that is on similar levels. So if we continue dropping for only 2 more weeks, the weekly RSI will be at these historical low values that it has really only reached a few times in its entire history. So I don't see the Nasdaq just continuing to drop and drop and drop and drop, like some are saying, down to 7,000, 5,000, I don't know what low values. I just don't see it happening, friends, because we are so insanely oversold. So okay, if you say that a bear market is coming for tech stocks, then at least we should get a quite nice bounce we should at least get a very high and very prolonged and nice bounce until we go lower, because we are, as I said, so insanely oversold on the RSI. So in my opinion, okay, this is my opinion, looking at stocks, long-term behavior of stocks, the probability that Bitcoin is now having a March 2020 low or a low similar to the March 2020 low is higher than that we retest even lower lows, that we go to the MA200 or weekly moving average 290 at around $17,000. I think the probability is higher that this is a very similar situation to the March 2020 low. Also, we shouldn't forget that the monthly Nasdaq chart is now on extreme oversold. And every time it goes to extreme oversold, we are seeing historical bottoms, friends. We are seeing historical bottoms, and every time afterwards we get some nice pumps. So therefore, friends, for me the probability is higher that this is indeed a low similar to the March 2020 low. And even looking at the volume, we had quite some decent volume here. The weekly bar is quite nice. Look at this insane volume. It was almost as high as in March 2020. So the volume also looks good. So I think the likelihood is pretty high that we will recover now and go higher. And with any luck, the dollar index will start dumping very soon. And this could indeed cause a continuation of a rally, which almost nobody is expecting, because everybody is talking about bear market. And it's always good to think the opposite of what most people think. If everyone is talking about bear market, you can be pretty sure that the bear market is almost over. If everybody is talking about bull market, you can be pretty sure that the bull market is almost over. So I think the probability is higher that we rebound and go to higher values from here than that we go to even lower values. So I hope you found this video helpful, friends of cryptocurrencies. If you did so, please leave a like and maybe even subscribe. I am doing daily update videos of crypto, of comparing it to the dollar index, to stocks. I always take into account the macroeconomic picture. I'm always thinking about the macro picture for Bitcoin, for the crypto market, always comparing it to other asset classes so that we can understand together what Bitcoin and crypto is doing and what will happen in the next weeks, months, and coming years. We can go on this journey together until the point where Bitcoin will hit over $1 million, which we all know will happen in the next 10 to 15 years. Thanks for watching, friends. Have a nice day and see you in the next video.